we've saved for so long. We can cover the down payment.
Is that you also? Been working your tail off and finally saved that 3, maybe 10, even 20% for a down payment, and now you feel like you're ready to buy your home. But just when you think you have everything all figured out, you learn about closing costs. I mean, we're talking about thousands of dollars of fees that you did not even plan for. Now you're just outright stuck. Unless if you negotiate with the seller, receive lender credits, or use a state assistance program to help you pay for closing costs. Otherwise, you could be going down a path that may end up costing you thousands of dollars. But do not get me wrong. You can for sure reduce your out-of-pocket costs, especially when it comes to closing costs and buying a home, or you can even get it all taken care of. I personally know plenty of people who have walked into closings and paid literally little to none to buy their home, so it's very possible. In fact, I'll do you another favor. Instead of hearing from me, you guys can actually hear from other stories that I was able to find online and see what their experience was with getting their closing costs covered. And you can see this one individual here was able to get their entire costs covered. This person also was able to get their costs covered, and they had a USDA loan, which is beautiful because USDAs don't even require a down payment. But this last story that I want to share with you, I like it specifically because you can see that the lender actually gave them some sort of credit towards it. So as you can see, these stories will always exist. They're not going to go anywhere because every scenario is going to be different from a buyer's perspective and even a seller's perspective. But if you think no closing costs is an everyday solution to you getting a home, unfortunately, that is not the case. Someone is always going to pay. It's just going to be in a different way. But I want to take a few steps back for those who may not actually know what are closing costs. Closing costs are essentially a bunch of fees and charges involved with finalizing your home purchase. Some of these fees can include the origination and underwriting of the loan, the appraisal, the title fees, recording fees, property taxes, insurance. And if you don't know, here's what a closing sheet will even look like. All of these fees can range from 2 to 5% of the loan amount. For example, on a $300,000 home, you could be looking at between $6,000 and $15,000 in just closing costs. But I want you to hear this first before you entirely take my word for it.
People assume that they are a percentage. I've had many buyers say, this seems like it's more than 2% of my purchase price, or it's that's not in line with the percentage that my agent told me. I'm like, well, your closing costs are not a defined percentage of your purchase price. I think that's unfortunately a common misconception. So we are here today to dispel that myth.
However, when you see an advertisement or a sign that says no closing costs, what that really means is the seller could be contributing, which is honestly not mandatory. It is something that you as the home buyer, or if you're working with a real estate agent, has to negotiate. Or there could be some offering of grants, maybe even down payment assistance involved. Lending credits is another thing. Or unfortunately, this is the last one, and I think the worst one, it could be rolled into the loan. Just remember, the fees and the costs for your closing is gonna go somewhere. Because the real issue with the statement, no closing costs, I personally believe it sets up buyers to believe that there is no out-of-pocket cost in order to acquire that home. And honestly speaking, for those that are watching right now, when you hear no closing costs, what's the first thing that you think of? Let me know in the comments below because I'm extremely curious. I've had scenarios in my past before where individuals literally think, oh, well, I don't have to pay anything out of pocket. Well, it's like, oh, well, there's some little things in between that you may want to consider, at least budget for. But if you want the stars to align and you to walk out of a closing without paying literally nothing or maybe a very little amount, then you got to be intentional with it. And you have to ask yourself, are you willing to look at homes that have sat on the market longer than usual? Or maybe the home isn't turnkey, move-in ready, and you actually have to do some upgrading or renovation to it. Is that really something that you want to do? If not, then you really have to ask yourself, what's more important, the perfect home or how much money you put in? You may believe no closing costs is a money-saving option since you don't have to come out of pocket, which is great and all. But first, let's discuss how no closing costs may mean those costs getting rolled into your loan or possibly getting covered by an increase of the interest rate. And if either one of those things happen, just know you will be paying the cost over the entire life of the loan with interest, which it may not make a significant impact on your monthly mortgage, but just know any additional costs going into your loan, it will increase your mortgage payment. And by doing that, whether it's your choice or not, can have an impact on your home equity. Because if the closing costs are rolled into the loan, that will ultimately mean you are starting with a little less equity. Now, that may not be a concern, especially when you're buying, but the real disadvantage is if home prices do begin to decline, or even if you need to sell sooner than anticipated, you may have some difficulty there. Sorry to break it to you, but these are things that I think as a home buyer you should really know, because no one's going to waive those fees or those costs. It has to be accounted for. At the end of the day, maybe closing costs is something that you are majorly concerned about, and so rolling it into the loan makes perfect sense. But just remember, it has to be on a case-by-case scenario. It's not going to be like, hey, I want to roll it in every single time, and it may work out. In fact, most cases I've seen it is when the appraisal comes in much higher than the offer price, and the lender has no issue with doing it then. And honestly, if your real estate agent doesn't guide you, inform you on anything of that nature, and you have already voiced that closing costs is a major concern to you, then, I'm not going to say anything else on that one. Now that you have an idea of closing costs and how it entirely works, you may want to know at this point, when is it ideal to get your closing costs covered? And how should you really go about it? First off, it's going to really depend on the type of market you're in. Are you in a seller's market or a buyer's market? Because closing costs being covered by the sellers is more common in the buyer's market. Actually, this might help you put things in perspective of the likelihood that you'll be able to get some sort of concessions from the seller. NAR data found that given buyer demand and lack of housing inventory, only 24% of sellers nationwide offered a concession in 2024. And that is down 33% from the previous year. So there's your chances and there's your odds. As you can see, it's down from the previous year, so less sellers are willing to give out concessions. But that's not the only place you can ever get concessions. If you don't know about this one here, that means you must be living under a rock somewhere, because new construction is another great source to get either some of your closing costs or all of it, majority, whatever. But new construction is a place where they are offering incentives. And of course, the builders are going to look at this entirely different. They are looking at it more from a incentive, a promotional, a marketing way to sell their home. So those incentives are not going to be there forever. You just got to really find them when they already exist or when the builder is offering them. If you need help figuring out what kind of market your specific area is in, or maybe just find a motivated seller or even a builder that's offering some sort of incentive, or maybe you just want your closing costs to get entirely covered, I can connect you to a real estate agent in your local area. Just make sure to fill out the form in the description that you do see below. That way I can get in touch with you, understand a little bit more about what it is that you're looking to do. That way I know exactly who to put you in touch with to help you accomplish your real estate goals. So maybe at this point you really still like the idea of no closing costs, or you probably found a way to get rid of it. But I would be doing you a disservice if I just let you go at this point. I do not want you to forget about the other cost that is associated with buying a home. It is not just about the down payment and the closing costs. You also have things like home inspection, which is more of like an indirect thing that doesn't really impact your closing costs at all. But it's something that I would honestly say, if you don't do it, just know you are running a massive risk. This is something like your home inspection is going to vary by market, but on a range you can expect it to be from maybe $300 to $600, depending on what market you're in and what's exactly going on there. But again, it's entirely your choice to get it or not. I will always recommend all my buyers to get it. If they decide not to, that's on them. And this same goes for you. If you decide not to, that is entirely on you. If I understand, if you may be, strapped with cash and you don't necessarily have it and you have a tight budget, I would recommend at least getting a home inspection. And then from there, what you can do, depending on what the inspector says, you can then take it a step further. And if you maybe have to look at maybe the roof, the HVAC, plumbing, the electrical, the foundation, the crawl space, then you can take it further. But at least start with your home inspection just so you can have a general idea of what's going on, and you won't be surprised. Because if you skip that, then you may actually be losing out on more money than you can think of, because now you just lost your negotiating power to maybe even negotiate some of the repairs. Or you may figure out a couple months, maybe a day or two later, that hey, now you just bought a home and it's dog water.
Ew, dog water.
This cost here is going to directly impact your closing costs a little bit more, and that's your real estate agent's fee. If you decide to hire a buyer's agent to help you accomplish your real estate goals of buying a home. So be sure to budget for that professional fee as well, especially if the seller is deciding not to cover it at all. And then you'll have deposits that you may want to include in your offer to make it a little bit more attractive. And that deposit is called earnest money. That deposit is really put into place to really show the seller how serious you are about purchasing that home. Typically, you can see it between 1 or 2%, but it's really going to be vary on that market. So really speak to your real estate agent on that to find out the details on that. But in the end, it's money that does work as a credit to you in the end. So it's not like you're just throwing the money out and just not going to get it back at all. It's just really a deposit just to show the seller the seriousness of it. And I will speak on this because not every state does things the same. In fact, some states only have earnest money, whereas here in North Carolina, there is earnest money and due diligence. Not going to get into the weeds of what due diligence and earnest money is. Just make sure that you are speaking with your real estate agent to understand exactly what deposits are required to show the seller that you're serious, to make sure that you have a really good, successful process of getting that home under contract. So as you can see, even if you're not paying closing costs, you'll still need to budget a good amount of dollars to get that home under contract, make it to the closing table, and protect your investment. After everything's said, if closing costs is still a concern and you're worried about it knocking at your door waiting for you to pay some dollar amount, here are some of the things that you can do to minimize those costs. First off, don't roll it into your loan. Ask the seller first if they're willing to cover the closing costs for you. And every loan type has a specific amount a seller is able to contribute for concessions. So don't try to be greedy and get more than just your closing costs if that's exactly what your goal is, because it may not even work out in your favor in the long run. Then you can also shop multiple lenders. Sure, you can go and try to find the person with the lowest rates, but I think it's more important to align yourself with the person that is going to guide you, advise you, and be upfront with you from the get-go. This is why I think it's important for you to ask the loan officer for a loan estimate to get an idea of what your closing costs may even be. And you can get that well before you write an offer. And if any loan officer gives you issues about writing up a loan estimate, I mean, that says enough about the individual in itself. And honestly, I would at least have 3 of those ready to go so that you can compare and contrast to see who is the best person that is going to fulfill you and fulfill your real estate goals to make sure that you do get those things accomplished. And then this one is also one that, honestly, a lot of people don't really ask enough about it, which is asking for grants or even the down payment assistance that do help with closing costs as well. As you can see, there's ways to take care of your down payment and there's ways to take care of your closing costs, but there's things that are in between that is still involved in the home buying process. So is it truly no closing costs at the end of the day? And if it is, I want you to ask them one last question. How is it getting covered? You know, I'm connected to 1,000 of real estate agents across the country. So if you need a local real estate agent in your area, be sure to click the link in the description or find your way to my website and make sure to fill out the form entirely. That way I can get in touch with you and we can speak on who would be the best person to fit based off of your goals and what it is that you are looking to do in real estate. Buying a home is exciting, but don't let that statement, no closing costs, fool you. Just remember, someone's always paying. But don't let that be you paying more than what you should. Because just as much as I enjoy making these videos for you guys, my name is Roney Polynice. And remember, I got your back.